just a minute or two to see who does or doesn't show up. God damn it. Okay. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully, a few more people show up. If not, that is fine. And today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building a NAS. I have a QNAP TS-653D-4G here, which is a 6-bay NAS running a Celeron J4125. This is directly replacing another QNAP, so I was kind of shoehorned into that ecosystem. But this is a decent unit. Comes with 4 gigs of RAM. You could probably put 16 in there, but they at least allow you to upgrade to 8 per the paper specs. And it's got a pair of 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports, which is a nice feature that's not necessarily going to be used in this particular environment since they only have a gigabit switch today, but it's nice to have going forward. It's certainly not going to hurt to overspec there a little bit. We are also going to be putting a QM2 2P, which is a dual NVMe PCIe card in it, as well as a pair of Pilot E 120 gig drives. We're going to use that for storage tiering, which is a feature QNAP supports. For drives, we've got Seagate Exos 7E8. These are 6 terabyte drives. Overall, just bog standard CMR drives. I picked these instead of the WD options just to avoid that whole what is SMR, what is CMR fiasco. So let's go ahead and start with, we'll just look at how one of those Seagates is packaged. They come in pretty nondescript brown packaging because these are enterprise drives, not necessarily consumer drives. And we just get cut it open. Inside, you'll have traditional blown plastic molding top and bottom on the drives, and then they're just inside some anti-static plastic. That's pretty run-of-the-mill for enterprise drives like this. I have Exos 16 terabyte drives at home, and I think those actually came in a carton of 4 drives instead of individually packaged like this, but it was the same kind of thing. You get some foam, you get your drives, and not much else. So, with that all said, those are open. Let's go ahead and take that out of there so I don't accidentally knock that one down. The pilots, this is something that we've looked at before. And let's go ahead and switch to our other camera. I hope that changed. So these are just Pilot E 120 gig drives. Once again, nothing particularly mind-boggling for this. They're just pretty bog standard PCIe Gen 3x4 SSDs. These are just 120s, enough to use as a caching tier. They're not doing any direct video editing off the NAS, so this will speed things up, but they're not necessarily going to be the only option for something like this. Personally, if I was using this NAS myself, I'd probably have a pair of SSDs inside the NAS and then like a pair of, 500 gig NVMe drives to accelerate things further. Let's move on to the QM2. And I want to say that is the correct orientation for this camera. So the QM2 2P is a dual M2 2210 or 2280 card. So this is actually the top end card for just dual NVMe. QNAP has a couple of different variants of this based on having a PCIe 4X bridge versus an 8X bridge, whether or not they include 10G base T networking on the card, and there's a couple of older SATA based ones. Now, for this, there's no particular reason to have added 10 gig networking. That's definitely a feature you could have added alongside this. As far as the SATA cards go, they're a little cheaper, but honestly, if you're going to be putting SSDs in the NAS for the purpose of caching, you might as well go NVMe. It's like another 20 or 30 bucks if I recall. In fact, let me check. So this is this is 120. The M2 SATA version, okay, is 70 bucks. So that does make it $50 more. But I could have just used a 2.5-inch SATA drive. There wouldn't have been any point to purchase this card. So let's take a look inside. We get our card. I don't know if I'll have to change the PCIe bracket. And what else do we get? Alright, that's interesting. So I got the card itself, which is good. I got an extra low profile bracket that I don't know why they included. I take that back. I do know why they included this. So some of their NAS units don't have a traditional PCIe drive cage. This is for something that uses a flat face instead of the more conventional style. Put those right next to each other and it'll jump right out at you. And then there's a full height, which may or may not be what I need for this particular NAS. Also included some screws, some really thick and gummy feeling thermal pads. I mean, those are probably an 1/8 inch thick. And then some form of little rubber spacers. Is there a little manual in here that tells me what those do? Okay, so ensure that the thermal sensor is in contact with the drives. Use low profile bracket, flat bracket. It doesn't say what the rubber pads are for. I take that back. It looks like the rubber pads are supposed to be installed on some M2s to like even out the heights of the drive under the heatsink. Probably not going to need those for this installation, but an interesting inclusion. Not one I've ever seen before on a card like this. Although the last time I bought a card like this, I spent maybe, I don't know, 25 bucks on it. As opposed to this, which is 120. All right, so put that all back in here. And now that we have wasted enough time talking about everything but the NAS, let's talk about the NAS. So this is, as I mentioned, the QNAP TS-653D, and honestly, I probably would have built this myself if they weren't already in the QNAP family. I'm not necessarily a fan of how this is packaged. So it's got these two tabs here with the name written on it. You pull those tabs, and then you fold this down, and then you start to get a sense that things aren't quite right. This is written upside down, so I'm supposed to flip it over? I don't know. There's a power cable. That's good. Here is an accessory box. And there's the NAS itself. Which I apologize for any booming sounds that makes on camera. Well, there's the front of the NAS. It looks like a normal NAS. Okay. And I'm going to assume any booklets or anything that this includes are in this accessory box, which has our extended warranty card, a quick installation guide, which I might actually need, and this power brick to supply an odd 4-pin DC power. Not a fan. Bag of drive screws, that's going to be real exciting, and a pair of Ethernet cables that look like they're just bog standard Cat 6, which I've already got some of that here, but we can use the included cables that, let's see here, patch cable, 4 pairs, unshielded twisted pair. It doesn't actually seem to have a C5E. Now I know you can push 2.5 gig over Cat 5e, but why did they cheap out on the cables and give me 5e instead of 6? Like, I'm not even complaining that I didn't get 6A, I'm just wondering why I got 5e. So that's a bummer. Alright. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the NAS itself. I apologize that I'm going to have to put all of those all of those drive screws in real time on camera. I probably should have prepared that. Alright, so here's the NAS itself. We get a covered front door, sticker with the name, although they didn't even bother to make two different stickers. So this just says TS-653D and includes the normal specs. Celeron J4125, 2x2, 2.5 gig, 1 gig LAN ports, and a PCIe Gen 2, which is part of why I didn't bother with anything like a Gen 4 SSD. It looks like I will have to use the flat bracket. 3 USB 2s, 1 HDMI on the back. Probably limited bandwidth to the chipset because these are going to use almost all of the PCIe connectivity. And a USB 3 on the front. If I recall correctly, QNAP tends to use that for what they call something like instant backup, where you can put a drive in the front and then press a button. And I forget if it backs up the NAS to that drive or if it dumps that drive to the NAS. I've seen that in both directions depending on what product lineup I'm looking at. Alright, so that just kind of slides off, which is good. More peels. Not very satisfying. And then we see our drive trays. And these are unfortunately not toolless, as far as I am aware, although it looks like they may be. And I would have thought that would have been an advertised feature. So if I take this drive and just plop it in, yeah, okay. So that is nice, and that is a feature that I probably wouldn't get if I built a NAS myself. This is a toolless drive tray. And while I'm popping these in, that is one thing I want to talk about. So this NAS was $600, we'll say $700 even, before drives. It is physically possible to build something cheaper than that yourself. But for a business application, you probably don't want to. And the reason for that is this comes with a warranty. And this comes with various cloud services and support and firmware updates and all those things. And number two, the amount of money that you would have saved building basically this. So it's a 6-bay NAS with with 2.5 gig Ethernet and a PCIe slot for optional add-in cards. Probably wouldn't have saved a ton of money. So to get 2.5 gig Ethernet would have probably cost me $300 on the motherboard. And I would have had to use a socketed CPU, and by the time all was said and done, I'd probably be pretty close to the $600 price tag this has. Now, as a consumer, that may still be a desirable path, because what you get by doing it that way is a lot more flexibility. So you'd have the option to include a dedicated graphics card for video acceleration. Oh, that's neat. That popped off. Oh, I've been using these wrong. Sorta. You get the option to include 10 gig networking. And you know, if you want to go 10 gig and you want to do it cheap, you can definitely get a SFP card on eBay for like 20 or 30 bucks. No problem. As a business customer, I might do that myself. I wouldn't suggest a client do that unless I was actively supporting it, because that is a quick way to develop headaches. So, you know, you get to pick what operating system do you use? On this, I'm stuck with QNAP's, what is it, QNS, something like that? QNX? Whatever QNAP installed, and, when they stop supporting it, that'll be the end of its life. As a end user, I can use Windows, I can use Linux, I can use a NAS specific software, like FreeNAS or Unraid. Did I get that in backwards? No? Something not seated right? And this is the part that I hate with toolless drives, is that when something doesn't quite fit right, you gotta look at it and go, oh, what's wrong? Because you don't really know. Anyway, oh, there we go. I guess it just needed massaged. And that's an advantage. So being able to use, what you want is a choice that you can make. And if you are supporting your own NAS in a business environment, there's nothing wrong with making those decisions and deciding that you're better off self-building. But if I'm deploying something to a client environment where I'm not going to be hands-on 24/7, well, pre-built is probably the way to go. Okay, so all those drives are in, and it looks like to take the cover off, I need to pull at least 2 of the 4 screws on the back. So let's just check this book really quick. How to install the drive trays, not really worried about that. Well, those are useless for now. So there are 4 screws on the back here that look like, if I turn it this way, and they may even be captive screws. Or I spoke too soon. So let's go ahead and take all of these out. What an odd assembly of rivets and screws. On the upside, this means we get to peek inside it. We'll switch to the other camera for a top-down view in a moment and just get a look at what's going on in here. So with those 4 out, this whole thing just slides off like that. I'll set it down there. And we can see, and I really hope this looks decent on camera, our PCIe 2.0 by 4 slot, which is perfectly fine for this, but I can see that this needs the shallow bracket. I'm also going to need to put the NVMEs in. And this is something that was presented to the customer as an optional feature. This isn't necessarily something that every NAS needs. And I guess you probably don't want to just stare at that printed circuit board while I do this. But it is a nice feature. And if and when they need bigger SSDs, those are always something that can easily be added now that they have this. The expensive part was getting this card. And these screws that hold that faceplate on have 1,000,000 pounds of force behind them, as always. And that looks like this has, I'm going to do this in the correct order, has 4 screws on it that hold this whole copper plate down, which isn't technically a necessity, although there isn't any airflow through that side of the chassis. So the decision may be that although the drives themselves don't necessarily need dedicated airflow, since they would otherwise get none, fan is a cheap solution. Alright, so let's move this so that I can put PCIe card under the camera. So there's our PCIe card. And I can actually just unplug that. So this is just a big piece of copper with a thermal pad on it for the PLX chip. I'm super pleased to see that there's a PLX chip included. And leave these, I remove. And we're just going to pop out our pilot. And maybe I will use some of those rubber pads. So the way that this should go is that the pilot's going to install like that. And if we look, screwing that down like that's going to kind of bow the PCB. So what they've done is two different things. Number one, the screws, and these are really weird, aren't actually full depth. If you notice, there's a little notch and like a retaining washer there. So these slide on and then tighten down, which means that they want me to take this grid of rubber spacers and basically just put one like that so that I don't damage the SSD. And then if I find the right size bit for my screwdriver, oh, that is a slotted bit. Okay, don't like that. They went through all that effort to make a fancy custom screw, and then it's slotted. Alright, so, oh, that's not going to work. That has a fault. These thermal sensors are supposed to be in contact with the SSD, and if you look at where I put the rubber pad, you'll notice the rubber pad went right in the way. So let's see, I'm going to put this right there instead, which will allow the thermal sensor to stay, no. What we're going to do is I'm going to do it backwards. I'm going to put the rubber pad under the thermal sensor, and then when I do that, it will force it to stay in contact with the PCB. And will still work as a spacer. And I still can't believe that these are slotted. Also wondered why they gave me 4. There's no way to use alright. So that puts our thermal sensor in contact with the PCB and spaces it out properly. And before I get too far ahead of myself, is one of these Phillips and one of these slotted? No, they're all slotted. So I don't know why I got 4 of them, other than in case you lose one. I do not know. But I'm going to do the same thing I did on that side. Put the thermal sensor there. And then put the SSD in like that. And grab one of these screws. Those are in. So now I just need to install these really thick thermal pads yeah, we'll install them like that. It's the controller I'm most concerned about overheating anyway. It's a really thick and really gooey feeling. Like, they don't feel like a normal thermal pad, they feel like someone kind of mushed thermal paste into a thermal pad shape. These are super soft, but that should also help them match up with any components under the SSD. I don't know why they've got holes in them either. That seems like a really odd choice for a thermal pad. But anyway, so that is our thermal pads in, that is our rubber spacers, and then this just screws back down on top of it all, and then that plugs in like that. And I really wish I had one of my powered screwdrivers with me. This is the kind of thing where you don't want to tighten it down all at once because you're squishing some stuff. So go ahead and cross tighten these. Just give each one a couple of turns to start so that they're all in. And then go back to where you started, tighten that down, and then go ahead and snug up the rest of them like so. And now we have our NVMe sandwich. Delicious. Alright, so I've got to put these back on, and if I recall, it went like that. Which is fine. Sure I got the right size driver. That is the wrong size driver. Do. Never a huge fan of these screws. It doesn't seem to matter how they design it. It just never quite works as well as I feel it should. The screws are either too long and stick out some, or the threads are not cut right because PCIe brackets are cheap and made by, the thousands. Or the replacement bracket just doesn't quite line up as well as the original did. But anyway, so that's all that. One assembled QM2 2P334 PCIe card. So we've got little fan, nice copper heatsink, and 2 SSDs in an odd sandwich. All right. So let's go ahead and install that in the QNAP itself. That's pretty straightforward. We've got one screw that we remove here, if I put the right size bit in my screwdriver. And that's going to be the only screw that goes in after we install the PCIe card. Now, actually, before I do that, before I close it up, I want to peek at the board. So one thing I noticed was that the RAM shipped in different capacities and should theoretically be upgradable. However, I don't think it's something that you'll want to do after the fact. It looks like to get to that portion of the system, you basically have to take the rest of it apart. I would have to take all the drive cages out, and then and only then do I think I could actually, in fact, let's pull this bottom cage. Well, I take that back. So with the bottom drive cage removed, and we'll switch to the other camera since that'll make this easier to see. With the bottom drive cage removed, I can see that there's one SODIMM here, and I can see a second SODIMM slot there, as well as the heatsink for the drive. In fact, can I brighten that up a little bit? Or sorry, heatsink for the CPU. So theoretically, if I pulled a couple more of these so that I had room to get my hand in, it wouldn't be that difficult to upgrade the memory. In fact, I could probably do it without removing the case, as long as I had a flashlight to see what I was doing with all the drive trays out. That's actually surprisingly convenient. I still would have preferred just like a door on the back side of this panel. However, I don't see any reason why that won't work. Alright, so put this drive back in. Flip this around like that. And let's go ahead and actually install this card now. It just slots down into the only PCIe slot here. Nice and snug. And then we put one screw back in. If we can get the damn thing to start. Alright, there we go. And that took us 40 minutes. Overall, not too terrible. I spent additional time on it poking and prodding so that, you know, I could answer some of my own questions, as it were. And I believe this slides down like that. And is just going to screw right back in. Once I get those snaps lined up. There we go. Yeah, so this took about 40 minutes. Most of that was spent, in fact, just talking to you guys as opposed to doing the assembly. You could probably do this inside a half an hour. Past this is going to be software configuration, which I am going to have to do non-stream friendly things for a minute and get up and walk around here to plug everything in, but overall won't be that bad. Shame I don't have a pause screen set up. That's on me. So I guess I'll just try and do this as quickly as possible. And what we're going to do is I have the TrendNet 5 gigabit Ethernet adapter that I reviewed, and I'll throw a link to that in the video description when I'm done. And think of it plugged into my ThinkPad P1 Gen 3. And we're just going to set this up direct between the two and run a quick benchmarks. Now, as far as configuration goes, I'm going to set this up as a RAID 6, and I'm going to set it up without the SSDs first, and then I'm going to add the SSDs just so I can test with and without. Functionally, there's no reason that I think it needs the SSDs for just file storage, which is honestly what this is going to be used for. But I offered it to them, and they took it, so I'm not going to complain, because, hey, SSDs are awesome. Alright, so how does this... Oh, that's weird. That plugs in sideways. Not a fan of that. Where is its power cable? Alright, so I took it out of the box. Did I really manage to lose that power cable, or is it just sitting right here because it fell down? Nope, that's a different power cable. How the hell did I lose the power cable? so I found a power cable, and per Murphy's Law, every single cable that I found before pulling this one from an active monitor that I had it plugged into was the wrong cable. So that sucks, and I'm sure it'll show up and that it got stuck in a box or something that I tossed aside. But that's just annoying. Alright, so here's this. I'm going to plug this into the TrendNet adapter. And, well, that's impressive. So the NAS, I think, is on. Oh, no. There we go. That should power it on. And while I wait for it to boot, do they give me a default IP for it? Seriously, it has to be internet connected to work. They want me to use this Q Finder thing. Let's just look up. It's what, a TS-653D. Well, this is interesting. I think I may actually have to have an active internet connection to set this thing up, and I'm not a fan of that. So it says if my NAS supports HDMI output, I can use that to set things up. So this has HDMI, so I'm going to pull the HDMI I've been using to monitor everything, and I'm going to plug it in and see what pops up. Which is so far a whole lot of nothing. Alright, so I'm going to power it on with the HDMI plugged in. Alright, I can see it starting. So I can see the Intel postcodes going past it. I wish I had thought to bring an HDMI capture device. I thought I would just open this up, see that the default IP is, 192.168.1.100 or something, and be able to do what I've always done with devices like that. Punch in a address in the same network to my adapter here, and then off I go. If not, this is going to be a big disappointment. Also, apparently this thing takes forever to start, which is kind of surprising because I know that it's not using a hard drive for the storage, and eMMC on a modern board is not particularly slow. So I'm kind of surprised to see that. Unless it's stuck. Let's see, do I have a third network cable I can bring to it? Okay, well, HDMI is a bust, so let's go ahead and grab another network cable to put it on my LAN and try this QFinder Pro thing and see if that's... Oh, it just beeped. I don't know why it beeped. Holy shit. That's how long it took it? Alright, so let's see if I can fly through this smart installation guide. If I plug a keyboard into it, and I apologize that you can't see any of this at the moment. This is unscripted, so The system is being configured. Do not power off the NAS or disconnect the disks. Okay, I wasn't planning to. Okay, well, that is at 1%. So what I think we are going to do is stop here, and once I get it back up, I will do a quick record and post that as a video either later today or tomorrow, depending on when I get a chance to do that based on how long this is taking. I think it's formatting all the drives, which is neat. So, we'll be back. I would like to thank everyone who has watched this fiasco unfold. If everyone liked the video, definitely leave me a comment. And, if you enjoy this kind of stuff, definitely follow the channel. Like and subscribe, all of that good stuff. But let me know, and I'll try and do more live streams where I put together a NAS or, upgrade a laptop that I've got. I've got a few different projects waiting around that I haven't quite taken the time to do, but certainly wouldn't mind doing on camera. And with a little bit more prep, then I decided to do this about an hour before we went live. Anyway, with all of that said, as always, thank you for watching, and thank you to anyone who helps support Pocketables, either by using our Amazon affiliate links or subscribing to our Patreon. It's support like that that helps make content like this possible. Thank you for watching.